Murtaye Vipralambara Sambuddhe Pudambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchitanandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Vrayate Gora Vir Bhava Bhumistvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Savabhoma Shri Jaganatayate Namaha Vanchakalpatarabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Premapadayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Chise Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhaktasaktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostate Jayatam Surator Bangor Mamamanda Matergati Matsarvasya Padambojo Radha Madanamohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadramadaha Shimad Ratnagana Shimhasanastito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Bihi Sevyamanam Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasaram Bivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venus Swaner Gopir Gopinatak Sriyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindabaneswari Rishabhanu Stute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavan Ki Jai. So today I wanted to lecture on some related topics rather than doing the next verse that's due, which is Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 34. But I have two big related topics that I want to go over today, and then we'll continue tomorrow verse by verse in Srimad Bhagvatam. I want to read something from Bhakti Charu Maharaj's book, Ocean of Mercy. He talks about the six darshans, or six philosophies, and some of them they can be interpreted either impersonally or wrongly or correctly. So in the date of let's see, when was that? On May 5th to May 15th, 1977, one of those days, Prabhupada was talking with his devotees, and he posed a question. He said, that to be an ideal preacher, one should have the proper understanding of the six branches of Vedic philosophy called the Saddarshan. Okay, so, and he said, when one understands them properly, one can understand that devotional service is the ultimate goal of the Vedas. Only then does one become eligible to impart the conclusion of Vedic wisdom. In other words, to teach what is the ultimate goal of the Vedic knowledge or wisdom. And Bhakti Guru said, I listened. A question flashed in my mind. Srila Prabhupada had mentioned in his books that 5 out of the 6 branches of Vedic philosophy were atheistic. So how could an understanding of those branches lead to the conclusion that devotional service to Krishna was the ultimate goal? I still felt shy to ask questions in front of the others, so I remained silent. But at night, when I was alone with Srila Prabhupada, I remembered Tamal Krishna's advice. So I gathered my courage and asked, Srila Prabhupada, in your books you mention that 5 of the 6 branches of Saddarshana are considered atheistic. And at the beginning of Srimad Bhagvatam, Narada Muni points out to Srila Vyasadeva that even the sixth branch, Vedanta, is tinged with impersonalism. So that also falls short of perfection. Why then is it necessary to study them, and how is that knowledge going to benefit us? Is it in order to defeat the proponents of the other doctrines? Now, Prabhupada's answer is the following. He says, Bhakti Maharaj says, Srila Prabhupada seemed pleased with my question. And he said, no, he explained, our main business is not to defeat others, but to establish the fact that devotion to Krishna or Krishna consciousness is the ultimate spiritual goal. Very nice answer by Prabhupada. This material nature is the perverted reflection of the spiritual reality. We have to understand that whatever is here in this world has its origin in the spiritual world. When in a reflection of a tree we see the green leaves, red flowers, and yellow fruits, we have to understand that they must be there in the real tree. Otherwise, how can they be in the reflection? Everything is coming from the spiritual sky. Whatever is here in this material nature is also existing in the spiritual reality. The perfect perception is to see things in that light. The Vedas have been designed to reveal the identity of Krishna and bring the living entities to his lotus feet. The 6 branches of Vedic philosophy are actually 6 steps of gradual elevation to understanding the ultimate goal, devotion to Krishna. Wow, this is brilliant preamble of Prabhupada before he answers the question, but it's a very, very brilliant point. And our goal is not to defeat others. Our goal is to bring them to understand that devotion to Krishna or Krishna consciousness is the ultimate goal of life for everyone. So that's a brilliant point. Therefore, rather than be contrarians, or rather than always be against others, it's more proactive to help others understand what is the real goal of life. Simply defeating others does not lead them necessarily to understanding Krishna. But giving many truthful statements why Krishna is the ultimate goal of life can bring others to Krishna in a very nice way, in a very positive way. And nobody likes to lose an argument, but everyone who is honest would like to hear what the truth is, and when it's presented in a humble way and with shastric evidence. So that's exactly what Prabhupada's going to do right now. So Prabhupada says, these 6 branches are Purva Mimamsa, preliminary conclusions, or Karma Mimamsa, Nyaya, logic, Vaisheshika, atomic theory, Sankhya, analytical studies, Yoga, linking with the Supreme Lord, and Uttara Mimamsa, final conclusions, or Vedanta. If you simply regard them as independent branches of philosophy and study them without their relation to Krishna, they appear to be atheistic. Well, that's exactly why the speculators who have written big books about these saddarshans, they don't correlate it to Krishna, and therefore they are misleading, and anyone that reads their commentaries becomes misled. However, if they're explained correctly and they're in relationship to Krishna, one attains the real goal of life. If you simply regard them as independent branches of philosophy and study them without their relation to Krishna, they appear to be atheistic. These 6 branches are like the rungs on a ladder. The rungs of the ladder by themselves cannot be the real goal. Their actual utility is in relation to the latter. And the purpose of the latter is to reach the ultimate height, devotional service to Krishna. The Vedas impart 3 levels of understanding: Karmakanda, Jnanakanda, and Bhakti. These are 3 levels of understanding: Karmakanda, Jnanakanda, and Bhakti. So now Prabhupada is going to explain these through the 6 or Saddarshans, the 6 philosophical schools of the Vedas. Prabhupada says, initially, one in this material nature wants to enjoy through sense gratification, and the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas gives directions on how to enjoy in the material world, and in this material body. As you act, accordingly you will get the result. Right action leads to enjoyment, and wrong action to suffering. This is called the law of karma, the principle of action and reaction. Therefore, one must know how to act in order to really enjoy. What can lead one to the highest region of the material universe, Satyaloka, where Lord Brahma is situated? However, in spite of all endeavors for enjoyment, one eventually realizes that he cannot avoid suffering. Uninterrupted enjoyment is not possible in this material nature. Suffering comes on its own and is unavoidable. Well, in Karma Yoga, one doesn't learn that right away. One learns rather how to have bodily comfort and enjoyment by practicing the mode of goodness, which is not pure, because it's always mixed with passion and ignorance. But it's better than functioning in the mode of passion or functioning in the mode of ignorance. But the modes are always mixed in the material world. They're not pure. But one can achieve relative material enjoyment by following the Vedic rules and regulations for attaining sense gratification. That's called karma kanda. But the law of karma says that there's always going to be a reaction for what one does while acting under the modes of material nature. So then it says, when a person begins to wonder why he is suffering and tries to find a way out of it, he comes to the Jnana Kanda platform. And through 4 branches of Vedic philosophy, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and eventually Yoga, he gradually transcends the material world and establishes his connection to the Lord in the heart, meaning the supersoul. Okay, so now he's going to explain how one progresses through 4 other schools of philosophy, Vedic philosophy, that is the Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and Yoga. So we discussed so far karma. Now he's going to begin with Nyaya. And Prabhupada says, through Nyaya, the person comes to understand that this material nature is a place of suffering, dukkhalayam, and that the material body is a perfect instrument for receiving pain. So, everything starts with the karma yoga, or the preliminary stage, which is called karma kamsa, or purva vimamsa, preliminary conclusions, or karma mimamsa. How to attain sense gratification through following the Vedas and basically staying in the mode of goodness as much as possible, although it's not pure goodness. And then one experiences, no matter how good they are at following all the rituals, and rules and regulations for being in the mode of goodness, still suffering comes. So they begin to wonder, why am I suffering, although I'm doing everything possible to enjoy all the time in the material world? So then eventually one wants to find a way of curtailing or escaping or not being subject to suffering. So now he comes to the Jnana Kanda section, a second stage of Vedic understanding, beginning with Nyaya, or logic. But through Nyaya and logic, one can understand that the material nature is a place of suffering. And it's called Dukkalayam. And that's a verse in Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, where it says, that the material world is a place of suffering. So there are two verses where he says that, where Krishna says that to Arjuna. One is, Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartana rijana mam upeti takonteya punarjanma navidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Okay, so that's verse 1, 8:16. Then 8:17 says, no, let's see, not 8:17, but what's that verse? I guess it's before that then. Yeah, Mama Petya Tukonte Punar Janma. No, Man Upetya Punar Janma Dukkalayam Asasvatam Napunuvanti Mahatmana Samsidam Paramam Gati. After attaining me, the great souls, who are yogis in devotion, never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. So these two verses, 8:15 and 8:16, both of them say Krishna says in both of them that the material world is a place of suffering. Dukkalayam asasvatam means a place of miseries, and it's temporary. And then he says, also, and from the highest planet down to the lowest planet, all are places of repeated birth, death, old age, and disease. But someone who attains Krishna's abode becomes free of these things. Okay. And also in the 9th chapter, again, Krishna says, let me find that verse, 9th chapter, 9th chapter, yeah, he says, Kim punar brahmana punya bhakta rajasayastata anityam asukam lokam imam prapya brajasvamam. He says, how much more this is so of the righteous brahmanas, the devotees, and the saintly kings. Therefore, having come to this temporary, miserable world, engage in loving service to me. So, again, Krishna describes the material world as temporary and a miserable place. But he says, but the hope is that by engaging in devotional service or loving service unto him, one can surpass this material world, go back to Godhead. Okay, so that's by Nyaya, and then it says, for example, just consider how many ways you can inflict pain on your little finger or any part of your body, but you will find so few ways to give it pleasure, from which we can conclude that this material body is a wonderful instrument for receiving pain. So this is logic. And then, that's Nyaya. Now from Vaisheshika, one goes further. Therefore, one begins to consider what this material nature really is. And through the Vaisheshika branch of philosophy, the person realizes that the perceivable material world is actually composed of the minutest particles called paramanu, or atoms. But to our senses, it takes various shapes, forms, and perceptions. In other words, what appears to our senses to be real is not actually real. Therefore, this material nature is an illusion. This is a big point. Ever since the discovery of the microscope, and further than that, atomic particles, in other words, atoms. There was atomic theory already amongst the Greeks over 2,000 years ago, but then it came back into vogue with Niels Bohr, who was a physicist and a Scandinavian physicist, and he formalized the atomic theory of matter. And then Einstein wanted to take it a step further, and he came up with the quantum theory, where everything is like a wave. And then further than that, they've come up with the string theory. Everything is like a string that's always fluctuating. So anyway, the atomic theory is correct, because that feeds into the Vedic version also. But to understand what is an atom, in Sanskrit it's called paramanu, we should take the Vedic understanding of it. So, therefore, through the Vaisheshika branch of philosophy, one realizes that the perceivable material world is actually composed of the minutest particles called paramanu, or atoms. But to our senses, it takes various shapes, forms, and perceptions. In other words, what appears to our senses to be real is not actually real. Therefore, the material nature is an illusion. So, when we see a table, when we see our body, when we see a car, when we see a planet, when we see a dog, all these things are made of atoms, and atoms are invisible. You can't see them. But when they connect together into molecules, and the molecules connect together, and eventually you begin to see forms. So, but at the base of matter are these invisible particles. So it's bewildering. And then you suddenly realize whatever forms you see, they are not eternal. They are temporary forms. And because of that, in the ultimate sense, they're illusory, because at one point they're going to disappear. You won't be able to see them again. So this is very confusing for people, but it is a fact. So one understands this through a Vaisheshika branch of philosophy, or the atomic theory of matter. Then this leads to the next branch of Vedic philosophy called Sankhya, or analytical study, which describes the material nature consisting of 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and the individual with 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. The senses interact with the elements, and 5 objects of the senses are generated. The ears interact with ether, and sound is produced. The skin interacts with air, and touch is produced. The eyes interact with fire, and form is produced. The tongue interacts with water, and taste is produced. And the nose interacts with earth, and smell is produced. There are also 5 working senses with which we become active in this world, namely the hands, the legs, the voice, the anus, and the genitals. In this way, Sankhya determines 20 tattvas, or aspects of material nature, and then considers 3 subtle elements beyond that: the mind, intelligence, and false ego, and subsequently the Mahat Tattva, the total material energy from which the entire creation became manifest. Through these 24 manifest, and then behind the Mahat Tattva is the Pradhana, the unmanifest state of material energy, or material nature. So, through these 24 manifestations, Sankhya philosophy analyzes the entire material nature. However, it concludes that these 24 manifestations are objective in nature and cannot exist without the subject, the I, the self, or the individual soul. The entire material nature has been analyzed, but the soul cannot be found there. Therefore, it comes from another reality, the spiritual nature, and has its origin, its source, in the Supreme Soul, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, Sankhya philosophy takes one to the spiritual reality and transcends the material nature. Recognition of the fact that the soul is a part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead leads to the final aspect of Jnana-Kanda called yoga. So now we've studied the Nyaya, Vaisesika, Sankhya, and now yoga. Yoga is the process by which the spirit soul becomes connected to the supersoul, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This process has 8 different stages or limbs. Therefore, it is called Astanga Yoga, 8 limbs. And what are they? Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dhyana, Dharana, and Samadhi. In the final stage, Samadhi, one perceives the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in one's heart. Recognizing one's minuteness and the greatness of the Supreme Lord, one's head automatically bends down in respect and one surrenders to Him. Okay. So now this takes us from preliminary conclusions, or Purma Mimamsa, to Nyaya, logic, and then to Vaisesika, the atomic theory, to Sankhya, the analysis of the 24 elements of creation, to understanding that the 25th element is the individual soul, and now to yoga, where one can understand that because in 24 elements there's no consciousness. It's only when you add the soul that the body has consciousness. But then through yoga you understand that the individual soul is connected to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul. And that is through yoga. Yoga means to connect with the Super Soul, or Krishna, or Vishnu. And now, once that happens, the final conclusion, or Vedanta, or a perfect understanding. This surrender to the Lord is the very foundation of devotional service, or bhakti. So in other words, at the stage of Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dhyana, Dharana, and then Samadhi. In the final stage, Samadhi, one perceives the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in one's heart. Recognizing one's minuteness and the greatness of the Supreme Lord, one's head automatically bends down in respect and one surrenders to Him. Now, this is what's called perfect understanding. This surrender to the Lord is the very foundation of devotional service, or bhakti, the main aspect of the final branch of Vedic philosophy. And it has been explained through the 6th branch of Vedic philosophy called Uttara Mimamsa, or the final conclusion. It is also called Vedanta. Anta means the last, Veda means knowledge, or the conclusion of all knowledge. The Vedanta philosophy is based on the Vedanta Sutra, Srimad Bhagavatam, on the Vedanta Sutra, Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva establishes that surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and loving devotional service to Him is the actual objective of Vedanta philosophy. So, Vedaischa sarvir aham eva vedya, as 15:15 says. Thus, bhakti takes one beyond liberation to engagement in loving devotional service to the Lord. In this way, through karma kanda and jnana kanda, one is gradually elevated to the ultimate point of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the perfect understanding of the 6 branches of Vedic philosophy. Now we see why Prabhupada is such an authority. He can explain even these most esoteric things. Most people never understand the Saddarshans correctly. Here he's explained it in a brilliant way. About the 6 branches of Vedic philosophy. Their conclusions and how each one leads to the next one, leading to the final destination, the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So this is a complex subject, but Prabhupada has revealed it to us today in an easy to understand manner. So, therefore, we should carefully study Prabhupada's books in order to have the correct understanding of Vedic knowledge. Otherwise, we'll be misled by the Mayavadis and other such rascals. Okay, so what time is the Arti, Dhananjay? Who's going to do it? So he can do it. I'm just waiting for them to start. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. And then we'll continue tomorrow with another special class, and then we'll go back to the verse by verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Haribol.